Over recent years, flooding has rarely been out of the headline, with the national media and politicians taking as close interest as insurance companies and those living in floodplains. But what about the other natural hazards?
A recent survey carried out by Post and the Met Office discovered that natural hazards rank as the second most important factor in setting property premiums, after competitive forces. But European windstorm trailed flood when respondents were asked specifically about perils. So what are the reasons for this?
So I think the reason for the lower profile of windstorm relative to things like flood and fire is probably in the history that we've seen in recent decades. So we've seen a couple of very major events, the last probably being around 1999, and a more benign period since. And so human nature tends to be to focus on the more relevant things, which have been floods. That doesn't mean that we can't necessarily expect a major windstorm anytime soon, really. So past history is not always the best indicator of future outcome.
One of the main reasons is that in the recent years, in the past 15 years, 20 years, it has been pretty quiet in terms of windstorm activity in Europe. And actually RMS run some investigation around that, and we found out, for example, that the average annual loss that the insurance industry in the UK could experience by having their experience over the past 15 years is much lower than if they would expand this loss experience over a much longer time frame, like 40 years. This could be even 40% lower. So this perception is very much there in their everyday business experience.
The reality remains that even now that we are in a low cycle of the activity of the storms, still, if we look into the average of 10-year loss, we'll find it's actually the highest of all the important perils, also against flood in Europe. So it is very important for it not to slip off the importance chart. On the other hand, actually I would say that when we do our risk analysis, the tools we use, like the catastrophe models, they take into account the impact of the 1990 or 99 season, which were the most extreme seasons. So actually during our risk analysis, we are not forgetting the other much more important cycle that it was 20 years ago.
Asked about how frequently they went to popular sources of natural hazard information and analysis, the Post and Met Office survey found that the insurance company's internal departments came top, closely followed by catastrophe model vendors, a situation that appears to be evolving.
The main sources of information we use, the base source that everybody's generally using in the market, is the catastrophe models which have been produced by the main vendor modelling companies. So there's the models like the RMS models, the AIR models, the CoreLogic, so EquiCat models. But at Willis, we've actually gone a bit further than that, and what we tend to do is work with academic institutions and external groups like the Met Office to enhance our understanding of the peril. And that's actually done at Willis again under the umbrella of an organisation called the Willis Research Network. And within that, we've got a number of themes we're looking at. Some of those themes involve using global climate models to look at wind risk and how it might be evolving. Some of them actually look at potentially using weather forecasts and oscillations like the North Atlantic Oscillation as a means for understanding what will be coming in a given wind season. And actually the Met Office have been working quite strongly on doing some predictions for example, the North Atlantic Oscillation, which are a good indicator of what might come in terms of storminess in one season.
Well, given a lack of an objective, historical, robust, really, data set associated with the European windstorm, we have to rely on catastrophe modelling companies really to provide that view. Though here at XL Catlin, we tried to work with academics from leading institutions to try and enhance that view. But really, if you're looking at the peril itself, if you look at hurricanes as a comparative example, there's a data set called HERDAT, which is a very good historical data set. A similar one doesn't exist for European windstorms, so it means it's a very difficult peril to get a good grasp on.
To get a handle on this peril, the Post and Met Office survey found that historical observations historical analysis and hazard maps were the most useful in assessing and mitigating perils. But with the gaps mentioned, what could be done to bring the risk analysis up to a higher standard? And where are the trends taking those tasks with managing windstorm exposure?
Okay, so I think there are a couple of ways in which risk analysis could be brought up to a higher standard. The first of those is about improving the understanding of the hazard itself, and that's the work of a lot of research institutes around the world to understand both the forecasting of the hazard forward in time on various time scales from the next day and few days out to seasonal and maybe even further, and also about understanding what's happened in the past in order to put future events into context. So, for example, things around risk mapping here, understanding what the likely return period is of a future event and that sort of thing. And the second is then in applying that information to the industry, so turning those hazard outputs into something that's particularly relevant and useful to people in the industry in their decision-making processes.
We actually do a lot of detailed claims data analysis to understand what actually drives the claims. So we've got data from groups like the Met Office, which give us very detailed wind fields for storms that have happened. And we can even have that on an hourly basis. So we can look at not only the peak wind speeds that have been affecting the risks, but we can also look at how long those winds were sustained. And so we can go beyond what's currently in the catastrophe models and look at things like durations. So, I could go on, but there's a number of different ways these models can be improved, and the only way you can do that is by doing research and bringing in additional information to things that's actually been looked at by the catastrophe modelling companies.
So the way the atmospheric scientists are aiming to help the insurance industry at the moment in windstorm includes paying some attention to clustering. That's a major topic of the moment, based on our experience perhaps of the 2013-14 winter season, when there were many events followed each other rolling off the Atlantic. Other areas include trying to get a better understanding within a storm event, a modelled event or in a real event, of damaging features such as severe cold fronts, such as sting jets. But another area that's increasingly going to be of use is in forecasting, where insurers historically haven't necessarily made decisions based on forecasts. They might do more of that now. For example, short-term forecasts, we're able to get a good understanding from 5 to 7 days out of what the storm footprint and track is going to look like. And the seasonal forecasting is constantly improving based on our understanding of the North Atlantic Oscillation.
So the profile of windstorm does appear to be on the rise. With the 2015-2016 windstorm season upon us, this is only likely to increase. The question remains though, whether the data and risk analysis out there is able to satisfy the requirements of the insurance industry.
And with the work that is being done across the market, the forecast for those underwriting property risks certainly looks to be changing from cloudy to one that is a whole lot brighter.